Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations. I've been reminiscing about ham radio stations that I had in college dormitories and other apartments that I lived in through the years. And the very first time I had a ham radio station in a college dormitory was in my freshman year in college at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, in a dormitory called Davis Hall, the fall of 1972. My radio at the time was I believe a Hallicrafter's FPM 300, Frank Papa Mike 300, and I, of course, operated CW, about 100 watts RF output, 200 watts, I believe it must have been a tube final amplifier, but the rest was solid state. Plate power input of 200 watts. I had my Johnson Viking matchbox, and I had at first a long wire that went out the window, or a random wire that went out the window to a tree, and it caused a lot of EMI, even on CW, to stereos, hi-fi stereo equipment in that dormitory. Even CW can do that. You'd think at first that it wouldn't, but it can do two things. You can hear a little bit of hum on no matter how little hum the signal has, you'll hear it in hi-fi stereo equipment. And it can also cause the volume to decrease or increase. And the residents of that particular dormitory did not react well at all to that RFI, unlike the residents in the Pioneer Hall dormitory when I was at the Gopher Radio Club at the University of Minnesota. These people were hostile. They even threatened to come into my room and vandalize my equipment. I only lasted 1 quarter at that place because, for one thing, I was homesick, and for another thing, I thought it was going to be the place that I wanted to go, and it turned out not to be what I thought it would be. Carleton College. It's a very good, small, private college, but it wasn't my speed. But after that experience, I changed my antenna to a dipole fed with open wire ladder line between two trees. It was only about 15 feet off the ground, but it was about 100 feet away from the dormitory building, and the ladder line, it was that stuff that has the plastic spacers, 300 ohm rated, a little over a ½ an inch spacing, copper wire, bare copper wire ladder line. I don't know if they still sell the stuff. They probably do. And when I switched to that antenna, the EMI problems went away. The radiating part of the antenna was far enough away from the dorm so that it no longer caused interference to hi-fi stereo equipment. It's amazing that the administration of the college would let me get away with that, but I didn't ask and they didn't tell. And I remember people playing catch with a football out in the yard and trying to hit my transmission line, my ladder line, and they often did, and it didn't perturb it at all. It just made a little gung sort of sound through my window as the sound conducted up the ladder line, but they couldn't damage that antenna. My Russian professor, my Russian language professor, saw that antenna and admired it. He was fascinated by it. He was the only person in any authority that reacted to it, and he thought it was cool. I don't know if I'm not advising college students to put up antennas like that in their dormitories. I doubt that very many colleges would react as indifferently or benevolently as did Carleton College to that. But I operated a lot on that radio. It seemed I probably should have spent more time studying, but I took 2 courses that semester. The standard load was 2 or 3 courses. It was a quarterly system. 3 during the regular year and 1 if you wanted during the summer. And I got A's in both courses, so I guess I didn't operate so much as to be detrimental to my studies. But I remember working on some DX, and the fact that it was tuned with a transmatch allowed me to operate on all bands, 80 through 10 meters. There was no 60, no 30, no 17, and no 12-meter band at that time in the autumn of 1972. But this radio didn't have a CW filter in it, and it produced an audio tone that modulated the SSB transmitter, and the tone had to be high enough in frequency so its second harmonic didn't fall within the SSB passband, so the frequency offset was in effect 1.5 kilohertz. So you had to, when you wanted to zero beat somebody, you had to put up with a 1500 hertz audio tone, which is pretty high pitched, but it was primarily designed for SSB, single sideband, that radio, but of course I don't believe I used it at all in the dormitory on SSB. Now, that would have been much more likely to cause RFI to stereo equipment. But interestingly, the 2 things that were interesting is how much of a difference it made when I got the radiating part of that antenna, a balanced antenna, well away from the dormitory. How much of a difference it made in the RFI, and probably also the antenna performed better because it didn't need as good a radio frequency ground. And the other thing that fascinated me in retrospect is how the administration just was completely indifferent to my polluting their campus with such a contraption as an open wire fed dipole antenna. But I had a good time on that radio, and my roommate and I were both very homesick. It was our first experience in school away from home. It was only 50 miles away from my hometown of Rochester, but you know, I was a mama's boy back then, always was, until my mama passed away about a year ago. And that's that. One of my ham radio stations in college dormitories. I'm just kind of picking through my memory to think of good stories to tell. And that seems to be a pretty good one. How the administration completely didn't care about my eyesore. But when I got into that stereo equipment, these guys didn't like it. And they made no secret of the fact that they would come in and destroy my radio if I didn't cut it out. So I cut it out by changing antennas. Stan Gibilisco, W1GV, signing off for now, saying 73 and so long, which from Davis Hall in Carleton College, Northfield, Minnesota, always ended QSOs with da-da-da-da-da-da.